Bill just read some spectacular, miraculous events that took place in the early part of Exodus that required Moses' mother's faith. So we are going to go to chapter 13, which is where we are as we're going through the book of Exodus, and we're going to see how we got to chapter 13 through this message today. And so in Exodus chapter 13, beginning at verse number 1, it says this: Then the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, Consecrate to me all the firstborn, whatever opens the womb among the children of Israel, both of man and beast, it is mine. The chapter before, chapter 12, is the Passover chapter, the sacrifice of the lamb and the salvation of the firstborn in Israel because of the sacrifice of the lamb and the death of all the Egyptian firstborn and the animals because there was not the covering of the blood. Verse 3, And Moses said to the people, Remember this day in which you went out of Egypt, out of the house of bondage, for by strength of hand the Lord brought you out of this place. No leavened bread shall be eaten. On this day you are going out in the month of Abib, first month of the year, and it shall be when the Lord brings you into the land of the Canaanites and the Hittites and the Amorites and the Hivites and the Jebusites, which he swore to your fathers to give you, a land flowing with milk and honey, that you will keep this service in this month. 7 days you shall eat unleavened bread, and on the seventh day there shall be a feast to the Lord. Unleavened bread shall be eaten 7 days, and no leavened bread shall be seen among you, nor shall leaven be seen among you in all your quarters. And you shall tell your sons in that day, saying, This is done because of what the Lord did for me when I came up from Egypt. It shall be a sign to you on your hand, and as a memorial between your eyes, and the Lord's law may be in your mouth, for with a strong hand the Lord has brought you out of Egypt. You shall therefore keep this ordinance in its season from year to year. So our question is, how did we get from chapter 2 to Exodus chapter 13 and Moses having the faith to follow God and to lead the children of Israel out? So to do that, we need to turn to, well, you don't need to turn there. I think I have it for you. Hebrews chapter 11. So Hebrews chapter 11. Hebrews 11 is called the Hall of Faith chapter in the Bible. And in verse 23 of Hebrews 11, it says, By faith Moses, when he was born, was hidden 3 months by his parents. So it's by faith they did this. So it's the parents' faith. Because they saw he was a beautiful child, and they were not afraid of the king's command. By faith Moses, now faith comes to Moses because of his mother Jochebed's faith. When he became of age, he refused to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter. If you had the choice, would you like to be kind of the son of the king? He refused to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter, choosing, it's a choice, rather to suffer affliction with the people of God than to enjoy the passing pleasures of sin. Notice his choice, verse 26, esteeming the reproach of Christ greater riches than the treasures in Egypt. And then notice this last phrase, for he looked to the reward. He didn't take it then. He knew that he would be rewarded for his faith, that God had made many promises to the children of Israel, and he looked to the reward of what God would do. But he chose rather to suffer affliction with the people of God. They were under bondage for 430 years. So they were under bondage, and Moses chose rather to identify with them and their affliction than to enjoy the passing pleasures of sin. And then he esteemed the reproach of Christ greater riches than the treasures of Egypt. Now, this was the kingdom of that day. This kingdom had great treasures. But Moses chose rather to, he esteemed the reproach of Christ greater riches than the treasure of Egypt. Now, one was seen by faith as he looked to the reward. The other was a pile of treasures. Now, if you're there, which do you choose? We many times make the wrong choice, don't we? So, here's Moses' choices. He could choose the mother that abandoned him, Jochebed. Strike one against Moses' real mother. She abandoned her baby, although she really had no choice. Exodus 1:22 says, "And Pharaoh charged all his people, saying, Every son that is born shall be cast into the river, and every daughter ye shall save alive." Can you imagine Moses' mother, Jochebed, as she was pregnant for 9 months, but she had to hide her pregnancy, so she worked making brick for those 9 months, hiding her pregnancy. Verse 2 of Exodus 2, "The woman conceived and bare a son, and when she saw that he was a godly child, she hid him 3 months." Can you imagine hiding a newborn baby for 3 months? The cries, the midnight feedings. She had to smuggle bulrushes and pitch, get her job done, and care for her baby. It's an amazing thing that she did. We see Jochebed's care and guidance. Jochebed must have carefully selected every twig and carefully scrutinized the slime and every part of the composition of the ark that she made for Moses. We see her prayer and her vigilance. Can you imagine that last night before she was to launch the ark that Moses was in? She perhaps stayed up all night, crying all night. To make sure, and her hope was that it wouldn't sink, and praying the crocodiles away and having no idea what the future was for that child. But she, by faith, stepped out to do that, as Hebrews 11 tells us. And when she abandoned her baby Moses, it was at the doorstep of God's sovereignty. Exodus 2:4 says, "His sister stood afar off to wit what would be done to him. Let's stand back and watch." Verse 5, "The daughter of Pharaoh came herself to the river. Her maidens were walking alongside the river, and she saw the ark among the flags, and she sent her maids to fetch it." Do you believe in a sovereign God and divine appointments? Verse 6, "She opened it, she saw the child, the baby wept, and she had compassion." She knew the law. She was to take the baby's life. She knew that this was a Hebrew child. She saved the baby's life. Billy Sunday said, "The tears of the baby were the jewels with which Israel was ransomed from Egyptian bondage. The princess had a woman's heart, and when a woman's heart and a baby tears meet, something happens that gives the devil cold feet." Verse 7 of chapter 2, Then said the sister of Pharaoh's daughter to Pharaoh's daughter, "Shall I go and fetch a nurse of the Hebrew woman, that she may nurse the child for thee?" And Pharaoh's daughter said to her, "Go." And notice this, the maid went, of course his sister, and called the child's mother. Don't you see the miracle of that? A sovereign God is doing some cool things, as Hebrews 11 says, because of her faith. And Pharaoh's daughter said to her, "Take this child away and nurse it for me, and I will give you thy wages." So she's going to pay the mother to nurse her child for the princess and pay her for it. Now, is that a God thing? God wanted Moses as a vessel, and to get him started right, God gave him a mother. Aren't we thankful for our mothers? Hebrews 11:27, by faith he forsook Egypt, not fearing the wrath of the king, but he endured as seeing him who is invisible. By faith he kept the Passover and the sprinkling of the blood, lest he also destroyed the firstborn should touch him. By faith they passed through the Red Sea as by dry land, whereas the Egyptians attempting to do so were drowned. Now go back to Exodus 13, and we read the first 10 verses. What's the key phrase in those 10 verses? Go ahead. Take a look, see what you can find. I'll help you along a little bit. Start at verse 3. Remember. And the phrase, remember this day. And every day they missed for a few years, but for 2,600 years, they have practiced remembering that day. What's another way of saying that phrase? Remember, have faith in God. Remembering is about faith. Faith in God. And here's what God does by faith. He takes us out of bondage. We have a tendency in our flesh to have a factory of idols, things we go after that we think will satisfy that never do, because only Jesus does. I found out on Friday night that Chris is going to move back to Indianapolis. Chris is here today, and I don't want you to miss on his testimony, because it's faith in God that takes us out of bondage. So Chris, come on up. I have no idea how much time he's going to take. We'll try to hurry him along, and yet at the same time, we want to enjoy this. He's staying here? Oh, you're staying here. Yeah, that's all right. You're going to be upset, Pastor. I put your name down this morning, and then he came. I thought of calling Adam and saying, is Chris coming? I didn't forewarn him, so he hasn't practiced this. But tell us a little bit about your story, and I'll intervene and ask questions if I need to. You know what? Here, take the mic.
Okay, first off, happy Mother's Day, all the mothers. And Adam, it's amazing to see you here with all your family in the pew, man. That's beautiful. It makes my heart shine, for real. I love you, brother. Okay, so I was born in Indianapolis, Indiana, at Methodist Hospital in 1983. I'm 41. My childhood, we're going to skip past for the sake of time. It was rather uneventful. Sports. My parents argued a lot. I was a middle child, so there was like some inferiority issues, but other than that, a normal childhood. But there were 5 friends that I had. There were 5 of us, I'm sorry. Their names were Brookley, Stacy, Jeff, Jamie, and I. And Brookley and I got into a relationship when I was 12 years old. I met her in 7th grade health class, and we were living it. We were doing life together and enjoying it. And until we weren't. We started experimenting with drugs together, and it was fun. Life was good until it wasn't. Like I said, June 24th of 2002, I unknowingly introduced her to a man that I bought drugs from, and he kidnapped and murdered her. And, this is my pain. I don't live in the past, but I still have to keep the door open to it. I'm redeemed through Jesus Christ, and everything that has happened in my life has shaped and molded me into the person that I am today. And while it's tough to say, I wouldn't change one moment of it. It has brought me to this point in my faith walk, and I thank God for it every single day. But because of that, at the time, I got into a very dark place. This man lived in my neighborhood. They didn't initially take him to jail because they found some blood at his house. but it couldn't be traced to Brooklyn. They had to send it off to the Indiana State Police Crime Lab for testing against her mother's DNA, and there was a process, a 6-month process it took, and in that time, we're born into sin, you know, we're born into depravity, and I thought that I was going to handle it myself. And that depravity took me to such a dark place, I became him. He killed someone that I loved, and the police weren't doing their jobs, and I felt like I was going to do their job for them. So I decided, for the first time ever, and for the last time since, thank God, that I was going to kill this man. So I filled a 40-ounce bottle up with gasoline and put a rag in the top, and I went to his house and knocked on the door until I heard someone approaching the door, and I lit the rag on fire and I threw it at his house. And I ran to a friend of mine's house and knocked on the window and said, I think I just killed Joseph Nowicki. And he said, come inside, man, you're high. Let's talk about this. And I sat down and explained to him the exact nature of the story. And about that time, the whole street filled up with police cars and ambulances and fire trucks. And my friend was like, wow, okay, you might have really killed Joseph Nowicki. So the police were already calling me in for questioning over the Brooklyn situation because I was her significant other, and that's how it works. I went through all of that several times, but this time the detective, Eric Klinkowski, that is on Brooklyn's case, asked me if I firebombed Joseph's house. And I had been honest with him through everything they asked, taking polygraph tests, you know, the whole deal. But when he got to that question, I just looked at the ground, and he knew that I was admitting my guilt without admitting my guilt. And he also knew that Joseph Nowicki had killed Brooklyn. So he let me go that day and told me to let them do their job. Thankfully, he wasn't hurt, and I didn't burn his house down. It just caught his porch on fire. But that could have been a very bad situation, you know, like I decided to kill someone that day, and I never thought I had anything like that in me, but we are born into sin and chaos, and those are the things that transpire if you don't have a firm foundation in Christ. So I'm still in a dark place. Joe goes to prison. He dies of throat cancer before he tells them where Brooklyn's body is. So we'll put a pin in that. That's a cold case. Brooklyn is dead. We don't know where she is. I'm in a dark place. 6 months later, of course, all my friends are doing drugs with me. That's what we do in our group of friends every day. It was the norm. And I went to my friend's father's house and gave Stacy some drugs that killed her. This was in February, so like 8 months after that. And now I'm angry at life. Now if there is a God, I'm mad at him. I think if there is a holy God up there that has a grand design, how could this be the plan for my life? My friend Jeff had gotten into a relationship with Stacy, so he was hurt deeply. We were wounded and losing the people we love, and he told me he wanted to die. And I knew he was telling the truth when he said it. In 2018, he overdosed on heroin and died in a Burger King bathroom on the south side of Indianapolis. Died on a bathroom floor. And by this time, this had become pain that I was comfortable in. Pain was my home for a long, long time. And I expected it. I knew Jeffro told me that he wanted to die, and I feel like this was him just showing that and living that out. So now not only the survivor's guilt of me, why am I still alive through all of this, but the anger, the dark place that it takes you. I was just waiting for my next, for me to be next, waiting for my opportunity to die. And in 2019, Jamie, the last person from that friend group that I mentioned at the beginning, she wanted to get into a relationship, and I ended up moving into a house with her in Greenwood. Her mother contracted cancer and was dying and was suffering to death. It was Jamie's best friend. And she sat down and tried to talk to me openly about some pain that she was going through and some struggles. And me being a man, I totally just gave her a matter-of-fact answer, like, no, you can't help your mom commit suicide because she's in pain. We can be here to help her and love on her, but you can't do that. And that's where I left it. And not realizing that she was going through a lot, that she was crying out for help. And she, 8 months pregnant with my child, overdosed and died in our bathroom, on the bathroom floor. And she left 2 children, Sammy and Tommy, behind. And that day, I realized I cannot do this on my own. And nothing was ever going to pull me out of that hole that I was in by my own accord. And I cried out to God. I said, Lord, if you are there, if you're real, if you have the power to change what is going on, I need you. Have mercy on me, please. And consequently, he did, just not in the way I expected. 6 days later, I had a bag full of drugs, walking down a highway, not caring about life, and got arrested. So looking back on it, I can see that was God. That was that redemptive part, God saving my life because I was going to take it myself. And so I go to the county jail for 2 years, and I had a lot of time in there to think. And in the most unexpected way, a friend of mine named David, he brought me a life recovery Bible. And he was in there for beating his wife in front of his children. And I thought, wow, this man has a lot of audacity bringing me a Bible and trying to introduce me to Jesus. He's in here for beating his wife in front of his kids. So I just kind of set it down. But he was adamant that I read it and that there's a path to peace and liberation and healing and hope. And I should start in the Gospels. So I did. I read the Gospels while I was incarcerated. And I did. I seen healing and I seen peace and I seen love. But I still just used it as an opportunity to get through. And I got out after 2 years, and I went and lived with my children's mother, and I was operating in a toxic environment just out of jail, and it can only last for so long. Eventually, my pride reared its head. We got into an argument in front of my children. I said things to her that I hoped that my children would never repeat, and that they definitely shouldn't have to see someone say to their mother. And I ended up homeless. So I'm homeless in Indianapolis, and 2 guys, their names are Jay and Mike, and they are servants of the Lord. I don't think they realize it. Maybe they do, but they came and asked me to work for $150 in removing some things out of a house in Kokomo, Indiana. And I'd never stepped foot in Kokomo, Indiana, but me being homeless, I was like, okay, $150, sure. I get up here, and they want to take my identification and go somewhere with it to put me on a payroll. And I just felt like it wasn't on the up and up, so I told them no, told them to take me back to Indianapolis. And they took me to a gas station and dropped me off and left me in Kokomo. So now I'm, all the things, homeless, hopeless, helpless, stranded in a town I've never been in. I end up hitchhiking down 931, never hitchhiked in my life. And it's not like the movies. They don't just pull over and pick you up,
You still haven't hitchhiked in all your life.
You're right. You're right.
Nobody picked him up.
That was that divine appointment that you're talking about. God used those men to get me precisely where I needed to be. I ended up going to Crossroads Church. Something just compelled me as I was walking past there. I knew it was 50 miles to Indianapolis, and that would be an extremely long walk. So I went up and I tried to get in the doors, and they were locked. And someone who coincidentally had graduated from the Valley of Grace named Luke came out, opened the doors, told me that there was a mission in Kokomo, and I told him I was actually looking for a ride to Indianapolis. A long story short, he called me into the church. I sat down with him and a guy named Pastor Dick Sanborn, and these guys were instrumental in pointing me to the cross and to Jesus Christ, and I love them every single day for it.
So Dick Sanborn would say that he looked at Chris after a little while and says, so what do you need? What can I do for you? And he saw Chris said, I don't know what I need. And at that moment, Dick knew God was at work and where they were. So
yeah, Pastor Dick started crying when I said that, and I was like, so then I started crying just seeing him cry that deeply. And he said, I've never, ever had someone that I never met before ask me what I thought they needed for their life. And we talked about how I'd torched my life to the ground, and I had tried it every way possible to no avail. And he asked me if I would be interested in going to a program that saved Luke's life. And I told him absolutely. And I assured my salvation at the Valley of Grace. I kept my word to Luke, told him that I would lean into the program wholeheartedly and take everything that I could from the program. And the biggest miracle of all, Jesus Christ redeemed me from death to life. You know, I found my salvation, and now I can talk about these things with you guys on Mother's Day, fellowshipping, loving you guys in this community because Jesus Christ is my foundation.
And what was the date? Was that November 20th?
November 20th, that's correct, yes. And it doesn't mean
that he was abandoned in Kokomo.
That's right. And it doesn't mean that everything is good. My children are still out there living with their mother who is in her active addiction, and, you know, there's pain. I lost my child. But I don't have to understand all those things. For me, that's what my faith walk is. You know, it's like an Afghan. You look at it on one side and it's just a bunch of strings and a bunch of chaos. But when you turn it over, there's so much beauty, you know. That is God's grand design. And I don't need to intellectually know God or understand why all of these things happened, but I take heart in the fact that I am being conformed to the image of his Son more and more every single day. And through the sanctification process, I am going to be shaped into Jesus Christ. And even though I'm a sinner and I fail, when God looks down on me, he sees his Son. He sees Jesus Christ. And when you're looking through that lens and you know that the creator of the universe that called the stars out by name and created the earth and the seas and everything in them and sustains it all, called me by name. Things are just that. They're just pain and just a tough season in my life.
Amen.
I love you guys.
All right.
Taking a hug, Pastor, man.
He stole that. So he takes us out of bondage. We're coming back to this story. By the strength of the hand of the Lord. You see that in verse number 3. So I've heard this story probably close to 100 times, if not more, the story of Maranatha Baptist Bible College. In 1968, it was established by Dr. Myron Cedarholm, who helped raise $150,000 to purchase this campus. Now, this is just the main building now, looks like that. Now valued at $18 million, a lot bigger campus than that. From the Brothers of the Congregation of the Holy Cross, Watertown resident Miss Elaine Sin called him and said, hey, there's a building available, and suggested that they try to buy it. And so in 1968, June 1st, they made the first payment. They started the college September 10th with 173 students, 27 faculty members. And in 1969, they awarded a degree to 13 students. So just miracle stories. So here's the question this morning. How does Chris's story, how does a story where God just miraculously puts together now Maranatha Baptist University, how does that apply to you and me? Are we to believe that God will do that to you and me? Same God, isn't it? So look in Exodus 13, 9 and 10. It says, it shall be a sign to you on your hand and as a memorial between your eyes. This Passover feast that they're now to do every year as to remember. You remember that language? It shall be a sign to you on your hand and a memorial between your eyes. Where else do you find that? Exodus chapter 6 with the Shema. Thou shalt love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your mind, with all your soul. You're to remember the Passover, to remember to have faith in God. It's the same God. They're to do it every year throughout the book of Deuteronomy and throughout the Old Testament. It's remember what God did throughout the Psalms. Remember what God did. Because it's the same God with the same power, wanting to work in your life in the same way. So for over 2,600 years, Israel has kept the Passover. For over 2,000 years, the church has practiced the Lord's Supper in remembrance what he's done. Going back to verse 3, remember what the other word for remember is? Faith. Look to him. And as we see in this passage and from Exodus chapter 2, our faith affects others. As Moses' mother believed by faith, so your faith, truly believing God, initially it's salvation, but faith to operate in this world and in this life, it's a God thing. Our faith affects others. Moses was the result of his mother's faith. Now, a couple of weeks ago when I preached, the last point was, remember, God keeps his promises. Today, it's remember what God has done because he's continuing to do. And it's God's power that takes us out of bondage. It's by the strong hand of the Lord that his work is done. Do you believe? Let's stand together and pray. Lord, I pray that if there's one here today that hasn't put their initial faith in you, that even today they would on Mother's Day. So, Lord, if they're here today, I pray that they'll come and find me and we can chat about it later. Then, Lord, as believers, help us to quit walking by sight at every turn and help us to learn to walk by faith, remembering all that you've done. And, Lord, help us to inherit the faith of those who have gone before us and to walk by faith living in this world. We ask these things in Jesus' name, amen.